Erev Tov and Getty, Boker Tov in Burbank, California, and Shavua Tov to all our friends in Saratoga. This is Wayne Firestone. I'm the executive director of the America-Israel Friendship League, and we are back with our Friends Indeed series, this webinar series that we've been doing since March, and everybody has all needed an escape, needed a place to think about that gets us out of our rooms, that gets us out of our boxes, and we found it. If we ever had a friend indeed, it's Reuven Solomon, because he has been bringing us these amazing virtual tours of different places throughout Israel, giving us that insider's guide to places that some of us have visited and are near and dear to us, but feel very far until we actually hear that voice reminding us of places we love, of people we love, of all of the different sensations that Israel brings to us. So we do that each week, and we do it for free. We invite everyone to join us on these incredibly valuable tours. And so we're grateful to have everybody here with us again today. If you have visited Akko, we want to hear from you. Tell us when you visited. Tell us what you remember, which fish restaurant you ate at. We want to know everything. Put it in the chat, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're here with us live now on Zoom. We have people pouring in from Portland, Oregon, from Timonium, Maryland, from Kuwait, from throughout Rockville, Maryland, my hometown. Wow, look at that. So we have people really literally from all over who have called in. We want you to share this because we make it free. I see Boynton Beach, Florida. Hello to you, Sylvia. We're grateful to everybody that's a part of this community, because we know it gives us an opportunity to escape for a little bit. And that really is the intention of our series. And so now I want to ask anybody that's on Facebook to share it as a watch party. I do that each week and always find amazing people who I haven't been in contact with for a long time. Thanks, Ina in Arlington, Virginia. Everybody out there joining us today, we know you've probably already gone on one of these tours with Reuven. Reuven's back with us today. We have, oh boy, I'm seeing hummus, and I'm seeing people with lots of gastronomic associations with their trip to Akko for sure, and definitely a fish restaurant for Mark Frank. Oh wow, who visits 4 to 6 times a year. So we have people that know this place, but I promise you, if you've been to Akko, we're going to show you a few things today that maybe you haven't seen. We have a few surprises for you. So stick with us through the whole hour, and I promise you, we will deliver. Reuven, going to turn it over to you. Tell us about this wonderful place, Akko.
Thank you, Wayne, and a warm welcome. I'm so happy to see so many people whose names are familiar to me, friends of the AIFL, Lynn, John and Dorothy, and so many others, all friends of the AIFL that I'm really pleased to be virtually meeting today on our tour to one of the most ancient port cities in the world, Akko, Accra, Akka, Ice, very many different names, and the one that stuck for quite a while, Ptolemais, all talking about that same city, the old city of Akka. We're going to concentrate our tour mainly on the later part of Akko's history. And when I say later part of Akko's history, I'm not talking about yesterday or the day before yesterday, but mainly from the Crusader period onwards. We'll go into a little more detail. But of course, first of all, we need to start with a timeline of this ancient port city. It is a city that was shown to have been established in around 2000 BC and has been a continually inhabited city right up to the present time. Of course, it wasn't always as large as it was during the Crusader period or as large as it is now, It was reduced very often in history to a mere fishing village after destruction and so on. And we'll talk about that as we go along. But it's a city that has been continually inhabited from 2000 BC to the present day. The first mention of Acre is actually a curse, that Acre is cursed by Thutmose, or Thutmose as some people call him, the Egyptian pharaoh, in 1450 BC. And we have the records of this in Egyptian clay tablets. And the city then was called Ak. And it wasn't paying its tribute to Egypt. It was a Canaanite city in those days, of course, and thus was cursed. It also appears several times in tablets from the Egyptian archives of the Amarna tablets, where Ak and Acre, Akko, is mentioned several times. But it is, of course, only in 1200 BC, in the period of the Judges, that Acre becomes an Israelite city. In the 7th and 8th century BC, 8th and 7th century BC, the Phoenicians settle in the port of Acre and use it as a major port. And of course, here we jump forward in time to Alexander the Great, when the Greeks first come in and the Hellenization of the city takes place, 332. After Alexander the Great's death, his generals share the empire, and Ptolemy and Seleucid. Ptolemy gets the area that Acre falls in, and Seleucid gets the areas to the north. And Ptolemy is the one who actually, in one of the Ptolemies, in around 250 BC, gives the city a new name, Ptolemais. The Greeks give way to, of course, Seleucid, and then in the Maccabee period, it's conquered once again by the Maccabees and becomes Israelite again, but soon to once again changed hands with the advent of Pompey in 63 BC and the Romans actually make it a functioning Roman city in what they called Syria. It is in this period that many important things happen. For instance, 63 BC, it becomes Roman. In 45 BC, Julius Caesar actually visits Acre. And in the later period, in 59 AD, St. Paul of Tarsus comes to visit Acre and spends the night talking to the Judeo-Christians in the city on his way to Caesarea and later Jerusalem, where he is arrested. But you can read about this in the New Testament in Acts 21:7, passage 7, if I remember right, of Paul of Tarsus spending the night in this ancient city. Following the Roman period in Acre, we have a break until 640 AD, when the Muslims conquer Acre, and it becomes a Muslim city until 1099, when the Crusaders, and this is where we're going to pick up our more detailed history and tour, the Crusaders take over Acre and make it a capital. In 1187, Saladin conquers Acre. In 1190, the Crusaders are trying very much to take back Acre, and after a long siege, they actually succeed in 91, where Richard the Lionhearted actually conquers Acre, and Acre once again becomes the Crusader capital. The Crusader period is brought to a disastrous end with the conquests of Baibars, the Mamluk, who totally demolishes the Crusader structures in Acre. Baibars learnt a lesson from what he thought were Saladin's mistakes, because when Saladin conquered the Crusaders, he left their fortifications standing, and they came back and reoccupied them. And Baibars was leaving scorched earth behind. He destroyed Crusader structures. And this is important in our tour because these destroyed Crusader structures remain underneath the new Acre that grows above, that was only recently, in modern times, uncovered. The Ottoman period in Acre sees the rebuilding. It's a small fishing village until Dar el Omar comes along in the 1700s, and then El Jazar, the butcher of Acre. We'll be talking a little bit about this fascinating character, who rebuilds Acre by landfill, by building solid buildings on the solid structures underneath Acre, and where there are open spaces, of course, he can't build on top of earth landfills. And this gives rise to two cities that we've only in recent times really discovered. An upper city, which is the modern Acre, and an Acre underneath the upper city, a hidden city of today tunnels that were not all of them were tunnels in those times. And today, to explore Acre properly, one actually needs to put on a wetsuit, a miner's hat, and to go through the drains and sewers of Acre to discover what is under present-day Acre, because present-day Acre is hiding the Crusader city underneath it. You know, the Ottomans give way to the Brits, and in 1917, the British Mandate begins, and Acre is in that stage a Muslim city, and the Brits build, they don't build, they actually use the prison fortress that El Jazar had built as a prison, a British Mandate prison. And we'll be talking later on about this British Mandate prison and a fascinating story of a massive prison escape from this prison in Acre. But it'll help you understand what we're going to be looking at when you remember that there were two Acres, the Acre above and the Acre below. And I'm saying Acre, but the proper pronunciation in Israel of this city is Akko. The Crusaders called it Acre. So I want to show you, first of all, after the British Mandate period, of course, in 47, the escape that we'll get a chance to talk about. And then we're going to jump right ahead to 2001, when Acre becomes one of the cities that that is a World Heritage Site. And today, if you have a list of World Heritage Sites that you want to visit, put Acre on the list, Akko on the list, it's there. I want to show you where Akko is in Israel. On the coast, as you can see, in the northern part of Israel, in between Haifa and the Lebanese border. And it's a very convenient, actually, place to tour the north of Israel from. Excellent accommodations, great food. We'll talk about that a little later as well. And everything in the north in, 1 hour's drive in almost all directions takes you to major sites. But let's start our tour of Acre. And the first thing I want to show you is how the modern day explorers discover Acre. It's actually a surprising story. The surprising story happens in what you're looking at now, a short video that was actually mistakenly identified by the early explorers, mainly British, who were told by the Acre residents who lived above, not knowing what was underneath them, that the city is haunted. And these explorers says, what do you mean the city's haunted? And they say, well, you know, when it rains so heavily, the water just quickly disappears off the streets and gurgles underneath our houses with the devils drinking the water. these explorers didn't buy the story of devils drinking the water, so they decided to explore. And in the next slide, you're going to see what is in this picture, an upper window right on top of the ceiling. But it is actually the gutter, the street level of present-day Acre. And water poured through it. And these explorers decided to go through one of these openings that the earth had settled down in. And they were amazed to find a very, very beautifully structured gutter. They think it's a gutter. And they see the ceiling above them and say, wow, we wonder when this was constructed. So they start digging through the rubble, down and down, and they uncover stone walls. And this rubble in the meantime is being evaluated with the pottery shards and dated. And they are absolutely dumbfounded to hear that the rubble dates to the Bronze and Iron Age. And they say, this is impossible. How could they have built like that long ago? 5,000, 6,000 years ago, impossible. But the mystery is soon solved when they continue digging, and the lower they go, when this earth is evaluated and dated, the closer they get to modern times. Because below the Iron Age is a later period and a later period and a later period. And they, of course, realize that what they're digging through is an underground tell. In other words, a landfill. And the landfill, whoever did it, and we know who did it, El Jazar, the butcher baker, when he rebuilds his prison above it, whoever did it took the earth from Tel Aviv. And what was on top, of course, was the most recent, and it became right at the bottom of these landfills. And what was the oldest was right on top. But it's through one of these gutters that the wrongly identified hall, because at first it was called the Crypt of St. John. St. John being the patron saint of the Hospitallers, who had their massive fortress built in this area and around here, were thought to have kept the remains of St. John in a crypt below the floor of these pillars. You see this pillar here? It has a trapdoor. The trapdoor that leads down into what we thought was a cave. And only in recent times, and when I say in recent times, I'm talking about the 1990s, we discovered it's not a cave and a crypt at all, but a route to some escape tunnels below. Now, you're getting a view of the different pillars here, and I want to tell you, while we're looking at these enormous pillars, and they are enormous because they're holding up another 2 floors of Crusader structure that has been destroyed, of course, above it, and we know that from the rubble found, and that's why these pillars are so enormous. But I want to tell you now about a legendary Turkish prison escapes or attempted escape story that happens above these pillars on the in the El Jazar's prison and fortress that he builds above it. Incidentally, El Jazar's prison and fortress had some famous prisoners, including the Baha'u'llah, the founder, if you like, of the Baha'i faith, who dies in a prison cell in the prisons above these pillars. But an old Turkish prison guard tells the story in diaries of and he was probably one of the oldest guards in prison, because he knew what was underneath the prison. And we're talking about the perhaps early parts of the 1800s, where this prison guard knew what was under the prison, but not everyone else did. And he notices 4 prisoners from a particular cell coming out, very anxious to get out of their cells in the morning, which wasn't unusual. But what was unusual was that as they walked around the corner, around the courtyard of the prison, they were tipping something out of their pockets, and he realized that they were tipping out earth that they had been digging in their cell, looking for an escape route. And when he ascertained which cell they were in, he decided to play a game with them, and each morning notice how they were going out of their cells, very anxious, tipping the dirt out of their pockets, and very anxious to get back in their cells, which was unusual, to continue the work. But he got a little sick of this game after a while, and he thought he'd up the ante when one night he comes close to their cell. They couldn't see him, of course, because their windows were high up in the cell, but they could hear a voice that they recognized. And he said, in Turkish, of course, "I know what you're doing," and went away. And he writes that the next morning, 4 white-faced prisoners rush out of their cell, running around the courtyard, scooping up dirt and putting it in their pockets, anxious to get back into their cell to fill the started dig through. And he writes that he could afford to play this game because he knew that they could dig down and down and down, but they'd never be able to dig out. This crypt was discovered not to be a crypt at all, but probably a banquet hall. And it's a banquet hall where we actually hold concerts and activity in. But first, I want to show you the escape route that was used underneath one of these pillars with a trapdoor that led down into a room. This was thought to be a crypt, a little cave, a little room, but with excavations in the 1990s. 1992, the major excavation started, and we'll talk about why. It was discovered that this was not a crypt or a cave at all, but an outlet into a series of escape tunnels that led into all directions. And here you're going to get a little bit of a view of the escape routes that the Crusaders had. I apologize for the poor quality of the video. It was my video taken in with not the greatest lighting, but here in what was thought to be a cave is the outlet that I'm filming from, of a series of tunnels that lead in different directions as escape routes for the Crusaders. It actually leads into, we haven't uncovered all of the tunnels. That's why I said that if you really want to explore Acre, you need a miner's hat and a wetsuit, because there's so many tunnels to go through that I would say, haven't even uncovered 5–10% of it maximum. And you'll see on our very short journey here that there are turns and areas that one could continue along. And incidentally here, for instance, an area that we haven't dug through, this goes through another part of the fortress, the Crusader fortress. And these tunnels are actually, the Crusaders weren't basketball players. They weren't very tall in those days. But the tunnels are extremely tall, where one could rush through, except for some small sections where one has to bend over double to actually scuttle through. And you'll see this short section here in just a moment at the end of our short video of the escape routes that the Crusaders had. Here you would need to double over and race through to get outside of the fortress. The banquet hall that we were in, that was wrongly called the Crypt of St. John, serves as a venue for some really beautiful performances on a yearly basis of the Israeli opera, and once a year, I would call it offbeat theater performances of alternative theater. And Acre is a place that not only one can enjoy the antiquities and the Crusader ruins, but a vibrant nightlife city as well. Notice the arches where you saw, of course, in the Knights Banquet Hall. Do we see another little bit of theater performance?
Reuven, go ahead. Yeah.
So you see that there's much more to Acre than just the ruins, but we didn't, until the 1990s, we really did not know how extensive the Crusader structures were underneath the present-day Acre. And it is only because of a deterioration in a hallway, in a hall that was at first discovered in the 1950s, from a different direction that led towards the courtyard that we didn't know existed. You're seeing here the prison courtyard that is excavated, and as I said, as late as 1992. On this prison courtyard, let me tell you that as a teacher in high school in my distant past, we used to have students before the 1990s visiting the Acre prison because it has very strong historic bearing in what happened in this country during the British and at the end of the British Mandate period. We would walk around this very courtyard before it was even begun to be excavated by the cells. You can see the cell block totally surrounding the courtyard. And we're actually we're seeing the roof here of the gallows of the prison itself. And we'd walk around this courtyard telling the prison's story. Well, today, when you're walking around this courtyard, it's not the courtyard, but the courtyard way below. You'll see that the excavations continue, and the excavations continue because of deterioration in the 1950 discovered small part of the hall on our side, on the, if you like, on the where you're viewing the video from, of what is called the Hall of Pillars that led into a dead end as far as we knew. But in the 1990s, a massive excavation taking down this courtyard all the way down to its original level uncovers a Crusader courtyard. The Crusader courtyard below shows us, and in a short video you're going to be able to see the Crusader courtyard. We're going to talk about Cornelis La Bruyn, whose charcoal sketch causes us a great mystery, and we'll talk about this mystery as we view the courtyard itself. Cornelis La Bruyn, you're looking at the prison above and the Crusader courtyard below and the Crusader structures around. When we were in the Knights Banquet Hall, we were through that door. That very door is the Knights Banquet Hall. Up until 1992, we thought it was a dead end. We thought there was no door there, but that door led out into the courtyard. You're looking here at the prison above, and the prison courtyard you can see is from where the banisters are. Now, the mystery I want to talk about is the mystery of this sketch, charcoal sketch of Cornelis La Bruyn, who was a Dutch traveler and artist, 1670s. He was extremely valuable because he drew sketches and then named them, and he sometimes wrote a little bit about them as well. And this one he calls Courtyard in Acre. And we say, come on, Cornelius, you're confused. You must have seen this in Lebanon, in Tyre, in some other place, because there's no such structure in Acre whatsoever. No stairway like that you depict. and the excavations that were sparked by the repair work that had to be done to the pillars, going down to the Crusader floor itself, reveals to us the mystery. If we can see another slide of the stairs that we discovered later, you will realize what the travelers were speaking about in Acre and what Cornelis La Bruyn was sketching, a stairway that was not built for people. This is not built for humans to climb up and down. This is a stairway for horses. Very wide, low stairs, leading out and up from a sort of a sunken courtyard to street level from the Crusader time. And the mystery of Cornelis La Bruyn is solved. We know that there was a staircase there, and we know what he was sketching. Of course, the tall structures that were around, El Jazar removed to build his prison around. And you're looking up there at the gallows of from the British Mandate period of the prison. That floor level is where the railing that you see was, right up until 1992, and we had no idea what was underneath it. But once uncovered, it makes a lot of sense. You can build solid buildings like a prison on solid foundations, but you can't build buildings on a land-filled courtyard because they'd sink. So where there was a courtyard for the Crusaders, there's a courtyard for El Jazar's prison that becomes the courtyard of the British prison beforehand. We made another couple of discoveries in this courtyard that are interesting, and if we can move on to see in one of the corners of the courtyard, in the next slide, you will see a discovery that I'm going to ask you to try and guess what you think you're looking at. Of course, here, a short movie to help you see if anyone can guess what this is. We're having a little bit of a problem with the video. We can skip it and go to the still. Here we are.
Reuven, it looks like a lot of people have figured it out.
Yes?
Yes.
Everyone knows?
Everyone knows.
Well, they must have used them in Roman times or something. The clue I was going to give you is that it might not have been too much fun being an archaeologist going below this to that pit that you saw below to clear out what was here. But of course, if you haven't guessed, let me tell you that these were Crusader Latrines, very large ones. That you had to pass on privacy, of course, because you're looking at a small section of what was a 36-holer. That's in one corner of the courtyard. But I want to show you now, if I may, what Cornelius writes as he sketches these stairs. And that's why we found the early part of the pillars, but we didn't realize how vast they were. In the 17th century, a traveler, I assume they're talking about Cornelis La Bruyn, who visited Acre, wrote on a staircase located on the western facade of the pillared hall. We descend a broad and magnificent staircase, all made of stone, wide enough to allow 8 persons to walk side by side. They were for horses, of course. Below, there are spacious and beautiful halls supported by large, strong columns. Well, this is the section that was discovered from the other direction in the 1950s. But I want to show you what we uncovered in the 1990s and what has become today if you like, along with the antiquities on display, a high-tech visit to the history of Acre. As we walk through, you will notice that there's been a lot of renovation here, but through this walk through the pillared hall, a history of Acre is recounted with some interactive stuff. You would see it, of course, not as unpopulated as you see it now, and the reason, of course, is that you know the reason. But even during this period, people are coming and visiting, and what you would see in normal times is all of these stalls actually working with people dressed in period clothes, and I'm talking about the Crusader period, producing arts and crafts relevant to that period in the old fashion. And you could walk through the history of Acre, walking through these magnificent halls where you can see some structure has been put up to stop the streets above from collapsing and prison cells above from collapsing down. But, you know, not only Crusader ruins were uncovered here, we also uncover what we commonly call the pit within the Crusader complex itself that go way before the Crusader period. We're talking about the Hellenistic period and the Roman period. And the Crusaders simply built above the ruins of the earlier Roman settlement in this area. And before the Romans, we go down a little bit to find the earlier Hellenistic structures underneath it all. Of course, what we found from the Crusader period is much too valuable to dig away to uncover the stones of the Romans and the Greeks, but it gives an indication as to the continuous habitation of this city. As I said, it takes one through the history, and the last part of relevant history for the Crusader period is when the Crusader kingdom comes to an end in the Holy Land with Baibars, the Mameluke, laying waste to the city. That brings us to when Acre is rehabilitated, and it's rehabilitated first. It remains a tiny city, very forgotten in the Ottoman period, but with Dar el Omar in the early 1700s is given new life, and then El Jazar. I want to talk a little bit about El Jazar, the butcher of Acre. That's his real name was Pasha Ahmed, but he was called El Jazar because it refers to his practice of violence and butchery. Jazar being a butcher in the language of the time. And he was very, very, I would say, respected and feared, not by his enemies, but by his citizens as well, and even his aides, because anyone who annoyed him lost a body part. If you annoyed him a lot, you lost your head. But if it was just a minor annoyance, you might lose a ear or a nose, or sometimes even an eye. And one of his most trusted assistants, a Jew by the name of Chaim Farhi, actually walked around with one eye had been gorged out, part of his nose taken, and 1 ear missing. So even his trusted aides had to bear his very, very fearsome butchery, and that's why he was called El Jazar. But he totally fortifies and builds the foundations of what is modern day Acre, including this beautiful mosque called the El Jazar Mosque, where he and his sons are buried in the courtyard. It's actually one of the it's the second largest mosque in Israel. There's only one larger in Jerusalem, of course, but the legend has it that he actually designed it himself, and it has a resemblance to the beautiful church in Istanbul that was converted to a mosque, and then a museum, and today once again a mosque just in recent history, the Hagia Sophia, that Ahmed El Jazar tries to imitate here, and in much smaller scale, of course. But underneath this mosque are enormous cisterns that weren't cisterns, that were Crusader halls that he has plastered over and stores water in. El Jazar was probably most famous for standing up to Napoleon. And he takes full credit for having defeated Napoleon's attack on Acre. But actually, the truth be known, it was Admiral Sidney Smith of the British Navy that was the main participant in the naval battle that captured some some Napoleonic ships with cannons, and then cannons that were pretty new, and had taken these cannons and had them installed on the walls that El Jazar built to keep Napoleon out. And they certainly did. Napoleon fails in his attack on Acre, and one could call it his Middle Eastern Waterloo, because from here he heads back to Egypt, and then total defeat. And El Jazar takes credit for putting a stop to it all. We'll see a little bit more of the mosque, the El Jazar Mosque.
Reuven, while you're pulling up the next slide, there are some questions that have come in about modern Akko today and who lives there. What's the population like, and are there industries beyond tourism?
Wonderful, wonderful question. It is today one of the mixed cities in Israel. When I say mixed cities, it has a Jewish population and an Arab population. Like all of the mixed cities, the Arab population is mainly in the old part of the city because that's where they were. It's after the conquest of the Muslims of Acre that for a period, Acre becomes exclusively a Muslim city. I'm talking about in the 7th and 8th century CE. But with the conquest of Israel, of Acre in part of the area that was allocated to Israel in 1948, 1947, Jews settled in Acre as well, and the Arabs remain in the old part of Acre by and large. And today we have a mixed city, like in Haifa and like in Jaffa, where the Arabs are mainly inhabiting. Of course, they're all over the city, in the new part as well, those who want to live in outside of the Arab quarters in the old city. But the old city is mainly inhabited by Israeli Arabs, and the new city, mixed city, with the majority being Israeli Jewish. It's a city that actually has had a pretty good reputation as far as coexistence is concerned, with here and there a few exceptions. One about 5 or 6 years ago, where incidents, of course, can spark, a small incident can spark a major problem that gets quickly settled. But Acre is considered an example of possible coexistence, because there are many Israeli Arabs living in the Jewish area, and there are many Jews, not many, but some Jews living in the Arab area, and certainly hotels and restaurants, and full of vibrant life.
That question came from Royal in Ohio, but we also have a question from Charlene, who I think got excited by that video from the banquet hall, and she wanted to know about how deep that is, and had a question about the air quality. So I think she's hoping to actually go visit in person. But I take it it has the capacity for very large audiences to be able to comfortably attend an event there.
Absolutely. Once upon a time, no. Right up until the 1990s, it would have been very hard to, because there was a narrow entrance in, and you may have even remember seeing in the video, there was actually a lift, an elevator that would take you from what was a window down into the hall. That was the way to get into the hall, when it was thought to be a monument of the Crypt of St. John. But today, when we've excavated the courtyard, there are exits and openings onto the courtyard, and when we've excavated the passages that lead into this banquet hall, which are wide, and it becomes much more accessible, and the air quality is much better. Of course, there are modern technological ways of making sure that the air quality is good through all of this underground area, and one can really visit in comfort.
So we have questions about. I know you mentioned earlier that we have to be careful not to go to dig too deep in order to destroy other existing treasure troves. But are there a question from Shulamit whether there's currently active digs that are going on in Akko?
There are. The currently active digs are focused mainly on the Crusader period, uncovering more and more of the Crusader period just under the level of Akko today. It's always a dilemma whether to remove what you've already found to see if there's something even better underneath. But once you remove it, of course, it's no longer, even though today many sites are using the method of removing and reassembling alongside in order to go underneath when they're pretty certain that they're going to find something special underneath. But it's always a big dilemma. But we're not going too deep down in Akko, apart from because we would have to remove much of the Crusader ruins in order to get down to the Roman and Hellenistic ruins, because once it's actually after the city is renamed by the Ptolemy as Ptolemaeus, that the city moves closer from the mound, from the Tel to the harbor, and that area is heavily populated with a lot of modern buildings on top of a great deal of Crusader buildings, including the Templars who had their fortress, and they also had a series of escape tunnels, one of them 350 meters long, taking the Crusaders from their fortress right out to sea in case of siege for a quick escape. So there's a lot still being done, and but mainly on the Crusader level and not lower.
So we're getting a mix of questions here. I want to make sure we get in and leave you some time to finish with your slides, but definitely questions about the port. People want to know about the history of the port and you know what it's like today.
Well, it is today, of course, not a port for large ships, but a fishing port, very lively. But in the time of the Phoenicians, it was a very important, I'm talking about 9th and 8th century BC, where they actually had an opening and a closing for the port with a lighthouse or a pillar that started. It was called the Pillar of Chains, or the Pillar of Flies, where there's actually a chain that would be drawn across in the Sudanese period, in the Phoenician period, I'm sorry, to stop any unauthorized entry or exit from the port. So the port today is very lively. There are a couple of recommended places to visit there. What you're looking at from above here is Khan El Umdan, which is now scheduled. It's closed to visitors because guess what? A major hotel chain has gotten hold of it to turn it into a 5-star plus hotel. So it's mainly today a fishing port, and right beside the port, Khan El Umdan, which means the hospice or the hospitality place of pillars that were taken from as far away as Caesarea by El Jazar. Guess who builds it? El Jazar. And very soon it's going to be a very special hotel. There are other very small boutique hotels, one run by a guy who was known as Uri Buri, for his expertise in fish and fish restaurants, and he has a Uri fish restaurant right by the harbor, and he has a boutique hotel called Effendi, which is super luxury, in the old city, in the El Jazar building, the Ottoman period buildings. So you're seeing here a little bit of the harbor. One can take boat rides, of course, alongside. This is one of the slower boats, but they are very fast boats that race around. You have to hang on. They like to give excitement to their customers.
I think I remember that guy.
So Acre is really a must-stop and a vibrant city to see because of its present day, and also because of the Crusader ruins, especially if anyone is interested in the Crusader history. It's, Baibars destroyed Crusader buildings. But later on, what still was left standing was preserved by El Jazar with his landfill and his building up above it. So that's why, as I said, 2 layers of Acre, Upper Acre and Lower Acre.
So we despite all the history, we keep getting questions about where the best places to eat are, and whether you can actually live in Akko today. Jane wanted to know without a car, and I guess that with the train, actually you can live in Akko, and you could head north or south toward Haifa.
Well, if you head north, the last stop is visiting me in Naharia. Mm-hmm. My home being closest to Naharia. But of course, the train system is fantastic. I mean, frequent trains running from Naharia to Tel Aviv and to Ben Gurion Airport and all the way through to Modi'in. So it's well connected, and one can certainly live in Acre.
Well, let's not forget our friends in Carmiel. We have Noreen, who's a loyally a visitor on this webinar in Carmiel, so I know you can get there as well.
Absolutely. And there will be a train link eventually from Naharia to Carmiel. At the moment, there's a train going into Carmiel, but a change of stations in Haifa. So are we going to take a trip to the marketplace to see the lively marketplace and one of my favorite cheap eating places? Because Uri is absolutely wonderful, but not cheap. And I'll show you a place where you can have a $5 meal that is, I guarantee you won't come out hungry. But first, let's take a walk through the marketplace. Let me tell you that without Corona, it would have been impossible for me to take this short movie, this short video that you're going to see, because it's so crowded that all you would have seen were people packed in. But today, because of very few people actually, comparatively, people are still coming, walk through this marketplace. And Acre, of course, being one of the ancient trading ports, specializes in spices. You're going to see a lot of spice places. But this shopping marketplace should not be compared to, let's say, the Shuk in Jerusalem, because here, this is not built for tourists only. This is the local residents use this for their shopping, their clothing shopping, their food and fruit shopping, and there are eating places. One of the nice stops in Acre for dessert or for breakfast are the Arab sweet pastry shops. That there's a whole range of delightful sweets to eat. And we'll talk about that after we have our main course. But some of you who are familiar with the Arab dessert called kanafe, you can get some of the best kanafe in Israel in Acre, almost across from my favorite hummus place. hummus Said, where I'm going to tell you about the $5 plate of hummus with all sorts of toppings that are mashusha or any other topping that you like, hummus seeds and a whole plate of fresh vegetables to wipe your hummus with. You know, you don't eat hummus, you wipe it. And the best way to wipe it actually is from peeling the fresh onion that you get with the onion leaves. Great combination. Pickles, of course, and a whole stack of pita bread. But to get to Said, you have to walk through the marketplace and the different shops. You're seeing much less of the fish stalls than you would. You're seeing these empty places. They're normally the fresh fish that's being offered from the harbor. But, you know, these fishing stalls depend on selling out quickly to the customers. And in this period, a couple of them still operating. You may see one or two of them. But in this period, the fishing stalls are less active. The vegetable and fruit, of course, and the other shopping of household goods, of clothes, and so on goes on. And we're heading now towards, as I said, my favorite quick hummus place. Some people say it's the best hummus in Israel. I don't know if I would call it the best hummus in Israel, but it is certainly the best hummus in Acre. Delicious. He opens up Said every day around 11:30 after making a whole vat of hummus, and he closes as soon as the last bit is scooped out of that vat. It could be any time. It could be 1:30 to 2:30 if it's a little slower a day. But the seating, I'm sure there are some restaurants in the US like that. Here's Said, Hummus Said. The seating is on availability basis. There's always, except now, a lineup outside waiting for a spot by the table for hummus. You tell the guy how many people. You stand in line, and when a table is or a seat is available for you, you sit with others, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, and wipe your hummus Said. So that's one of the things to do in Acre. Very tasty.
Reuven, I think you have whet our appetite, and you have delivered on the $5 hummus special and where to go in Akko to get it, which is more than any of us could have expected. But in all candor, I think people really have enjoyed this touch of old and new, and appreciate your actually taking us with these little videos, even to sort of feeling the people of this very moment. And so what a beautiful place to visit. Those of us that have been there can't wait to get back. And I think all of the comments that are just flooding in really reflect what a wonderful reminder of a jewel of a place that has to be on everybody's next tour. And you even know which train station to get off to go visit Reuven up in Nahariya. So he'll be looking forward to greeting you all or running into you at the best hummus spot. But we're not resting on his laurels. Next month, he will bring you the best places to visit in two Galilee greats, in Haifa and in Nazareth. We're going to do a double header. So be on the lookout on our website for all of that information. But we're not expecting you to wait the whole next month. We've got coming up for you next week a tour of wine regions in Israel, as well as in California and Arizona. This coming week, on Wednesday, my colleague Ruby is going to take you to Tel Aviv to see some of the best crafts at the biennial exhibit that takes place. She has brought you repeatedly some of these cultural jewels in the arts, and we're so excited to do that again. So each week we bring you something new. This has been a summer none of us were prepared for, but nonetheless, we innovated. We found a way to bring a little joy into people's lives and to create a little bit of escape. We're all looking forward to having an actual reunion in Israel as soon as we can. But in the meantime, the Friends and Deeds program really is meant to bring people together. We continue on a daily basis over the next few weeks for our Tweens program, known as Betweens. And if you know any 10 or 12-year-olds, either in Israel or in the United States, who are looking just for some plain fun with other kids, really have them come check out on our website, because this program has just been an absolute delight to see how Americans and Israelis at a young age can really bring together the fun of their different cultures. So thanks for joining us again this week. Have a wonderful start to your week, and we look forward to being with you on this series. Week in and week out. We have lots of wonderful things planned for you, so please come join us. Shavua Tov to everybody. Thanks again, Reuven.
Shavua Tov, thank you, and we'll see you next month.